Mm.
We still have 1 minute to go, and there are more and more participants coming in. So we'll just be waiting a little bit before we really start.
And you will introduce me briefly, will you?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll introduce you.
You don't need to say very much, right? Just say that I'm a teacher and a researcher and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I don't expect one of these long. In Spain, you know, we like to have introductions that take about 10 minutes, but it's very boring for everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's gonna be very long to introduce you because you do have an impressive record.
Yeah,
of
but you don't need to. You don't need to. You don't need to say hundreds of things. Really, it's not necessary.
Oops. Right, I think we're going to start. So, welcome everyone. Happy New Year again. So we're back to our ISSIG-LAD pedagogical webinar series for the academic year 2025-2026. I'm happy to introduce our fourth speaker in this series, Professor Ruth Breeze. Ruth Breeze is a full professor of English at the University of Navarra, Spain, and she's also the principal investigator of the GradUN research group in the Instituto Cultura y Sociedad. I think I'm pronouncing this a little bit correctly, right? She has published widely on scientific discourse, legal discourse, specialized communication. I strongly advise you to go over her Google Scholar profile because she has a wide range of publications across different fields. She's also the co-editor-in-chief of Iberica Journal. Okay. So today she will give a talk entitled Supporting Students in EMI, English Mediated Instruction, Teaching Note-Taking. So we'll focus really on note-taking. So Ruth, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bouzidi. That was very kind. And can you hear me okay?
I think everyone is hearing you okay. If
Good.
someone
just checking
does not,
that.
yeah,
I'm just checking that because, you know, sometimes you start talking and then you realize people don't hear.
Yeah.
So that's fair. That's good. Okay, well, thank you very much for that welcome. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, even if it's only virtually in Genduba, and also to have people participating from many different places. So this is a pleasure for me as well. I'm speaking today from Spain, where it has been raining for several days, and we are worried about water coming into our building, but at this moment it's okay. Okay. Right. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is something that perhaps affects you wherever you are, really, because it's about teaching note-taking, and it's about a form of support for students in English medium instruction. Probably many of your universities have courses offered in English to students who are not maybe as proficient in English as they should be. And so this has had two rather strange effects. One effect is for the universities to say, I don't think we need as many English classes as we had before because the students can understand the classes. On the other hand, the content teachers often come to the English department and say, can you help me because my students don't understand the classes. They're not taking good notes. They're not writing properly. And so we're caught in a kind of rather awkward situation sometimes. The thing is to try to promote the actual application of proper English teaching on the one hand, because students still need it, and on the other hand, offer support to the students in EMI and to their teachers. And we have to just offer a positive response. I think these decisions about EMI are usually made at a high level in the university, and many times the people who make them don't really understand about language acquisition and language learning, but all we can do is try to give them support. I'm going to talk today about how we provided some support for EMI teachers, students. We also provided support for the teachers, right? But that's a topic for another day. I'm going to talk about the specific point about note-taking. Why is note-taking particularly important in our culture, right? How we could measure the students' note-taking skills, and then about how we can design an experimental study that has ecological validity. In other words, an experimental study that is not simply like a lab experiment that has no application to the classroom, one which actually could be interesting and produce results that tell us what we can do in real life, which is what we were interested in. Then I'll explain the results of our study and some conclusions, and then maybe suggest a few other ideas about how to support students in EMI programs. Okay, so to begin then, why do we need to provide support for EMI students? We have in my university bilingual degrees or degrees offered in English and Spanish in most of the faculties of the university.
I'm
Not
just
all.
popping up. Sorry, Ruth,
Sorry.
but I'm just. Are you moving your slides?
Yes, I moved it on. Yes.
No, it's not appearing here. So we just
It's
have
not
the
moving.
first slide. Yeah, it's
Oh
not
dear.
moving.
So let me
Whereas-
just see what I can do about that. Just a second. Sorry. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Can you see it now?
Take your time.
What can you
We
see
still
now?
see no, we still see the first slide, the title and your name.
Okay.
Oh,
I've stopped sharing, right? I'm going to go to share again.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go to this one. What can you see now?
It's coming, I think. Yes, we see contents now.
Okay, are you seeing full screen or part of the
No,
screen?
part of the screen with the other
Okay,
slides on the left.
but if I put it onto full screen, we may have the same problem again.
Can you try again? Maybe,
I'll try full
and
screen.
if it doesn't work, then we'll come
I'll
back
try full
to.
screen. Can you see full screen contents now?
No, we still
No.
are not in the. You can keep
Okay.
on.
I think I'll have to leave it like this then.
Right. Okay, no problem.
If that seems to work. So if I move to the next one, can you see the next one?
We still see content now.
No? Sorry, I'm going to try to do something else. When it says share, I'm sorry. Where can I go? I go to share, right? And
you go to
there I
share.
go to window or to screen?
I think you should just go to the window, just to share the PowerPoint and not the full screen of your laptop or computer.
Okay, so I've gone to window and I go to supporting students. And then I get this. What are you seeing now?
I think it's still coming, but we don't see anything so far. It's still coming.
To do with the internet connection, I think.
Content.
Okay. Well, if I go to the next one, can you see the next one now?
No.
Oh, okay. So it seems it only picks up the first one of each time that I do it. It's very strange.
Do you want me to? Do you want to send your presentation and then I'll share it from here, see if it works on my side?
I can do that. Yes, we can do that.
Right. And meanwhile, you can still carry on if you want to.
Yeah. Let me just get back to my email, and I will send it to you, Basma. It's very strange. It's never happened to me like this before, but
Yeah.
I understand that we have maybe incompatible systems or something.
It might be also the internet connection that is very slow.
Yes.
So
I just sent you the PowerPoint. All right. I'm just going to.
If you want to carry on, I mean, I'm waiting for it to come in.
So there are several points I'm going to carry on talking about EMI, and then I hope you'll be able to get the PowerPoint in a minute. Yeah, and then I can tell you when we have to change slides. Okay. So in our university, we have all of these bilingual programs and bilingual degree courses. Probably you have similar things going on in your universities. And when this was started, there was an idea that students would need a minimum level of English. But for different reasons, this is not always applied. If every student in the program had a C1 level, we might argue we don't really need to give them much support because C1 is the level for study in another language. But in many cases, there's either no entry level of English required, or it's a B2 level, which tends to be a rather low B2 level. Second reason why we might want to give support with note taking, for example, is that higher education requires new skills. So in schools, in this country at least, you don't have formal lectures in the way you do in the university. In schools in Spain, basically you have classes and they're more interactive. The teacher explains, but you also do exercises, and there's a general interaction and ability to ask questions in small groups. The classes are only 25 students. When the students come to university, they suddenly find themselves in a classroom full of, say, 100 students, a teacher who presents a PowerPoint, and they're expected simply to sit down and take notes throughout a class of 1 hour or 2 hours. And of course, this is a new skill. It's not one that they've learned at school, and some people don't know how to do it. Most universities don't provide any help with academic skills in this way, and they provide very little help with language competencies. And of course, there's one very important thing to remember. In fact, my colleague Paul Miller and I did a study on this many years ago, and we actually measured the students' listening comprehension ability in English at the beginning of the year. And we correlated that with the grade they obtained in the subject at the end of the semester. And we found that obviously, we thought obviously, but the faculties were surprised that the level of English the students had was strongly related to the achievement in that course. And so the students with better English listening skills did better in the courses in medicine, law, history that were taught in English. And it seems to us as language teachers fairly obvious it's going to be like that. But the content teachers were very surprised by this, which I think was an interesting thing. Basma, have you found my PowerPoint? Would you like to share it?
Yes, I just opened this and I'm gonna share.
I will be on slide 4 at this moment.
Okay. So is this?
Yes, this one. That's
showing?
That's fine. Yes, fine. I see it. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So, as it says here, note taking is important because the average student in our Faculty of Economics, for example, probably has between 4 and 8 hours of class per day. And during all that time, the student is supposed to be making effective notes. It's not a skill he's learnt at school. And there is some research which suggests that note taking is a thing you can teach, right? So people who get to be good at making shorter like summaries of the lecture, using symbols, using abbreviations, writing down the keywords, not writing everything down. These people tend to make better notes, and when they go back to them afterwards, they can actually use them for study. I think we've all had the experience of going to a class of making notes and then looking at them afterwards and thinking, I don't remember what that was about. What did I write here? You know? And so, in fact, I think we all can learn to make good notes. And our 18-year-old students here in Spain, they need to learn this skill. So can you move on to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Right. I'm afraid, yeah, okay, that's right. So there's a lot of research on note-taking, and much of it is done by someone called Josef Siegel, who is based in Sweden. He has several papers which are really quite interesting, and they're mainly experimental. And he's tried to work out how we can measure the quality of the notes that the students take. So, for example, you could measure the total number of things they write down. You could measure the total number of words they write down which are actually meaningful or relevant, which might not be the same thing. You can measure the number of content words they write minus the number of function words. Okay. He also has this concept of the information unit. So how many of the information units contained in the lecture actually get written down in the students' notes? What is an information unit? That's a little bit subjective, right? Because we worked with a content teacher on this, and he told us what he thought the information units were. That's the minimum amount of information that would count as one unit. So, for example, Jendouba is in Tunisia would be 1 unit of information, right? They're like minimum packets of information. Use of abbreviations is another thing that he's measured. He also suggested we should perhaps measure give a kind of listening comprehension test of the general gist of the lecture. So you, at the end of the lecture, you could give a number of questions to see whether the students could use their lectures to answer those questions. The problem is that that doesn't really test the if you like, the efficacy of the notes. It may be just testing the student's memory. Okay. You could also look at the completeness of their lectures, so the total number of possible information units that there are in a lecture, which would be a lot, I think, and how many information units the student writes down. That could give you a kind of completeness score, and an efficiency ratio. So if the student manages to include more information units using fewer words, that student is efficient in his way of understanding it. So there'll be efficient notes, okay? But there is always a question here, which is that many of those experiments were conducted under experimental conditions, and real life is not like that. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Yes. So there is this question of ecological validity. Ecological validity is the question of whether the studies you do involving experiments in academic skills, EAP, ESP, whatever, would in fact be at all relevant to real classroom practice. So do students who learn, for example, note-taking in a classroom experiment, which was what he had students studying EAP, would they then go to their content courses and actually use those skills or not? And then, for example, the case in my university is that we don't have academic skills courses. So what help can we provide for students when there is no EAP support? And the help we provide has to be ecological from the beginning, because it has to be packaged inside the actual, if you like, content course. We have to persuade a teacher to allow us to go into his content course, and the help we give has to be given within the context of a real lecture. Okay, so this was the challenge that we had. Next slide. Our classrooms are fairly large. We have some lectures that may have up to about 100 students. We tend not to go over 100 these days. In the past, many years ago, we had lectures which maybe had 300 students, but now we would say the maximum is about 100. It's still a lot of people. You don't know what they're doing on the back row. And the lecturer gives his lecture assuming that people understand, but they're not very interactive. In Spain, there's always a complaint from the exchange students. They always say, why don't Spanish students ask questions? I think it's to do with the culture. Our students are quite passive. they make notes. Some of them have a tradition of getting somebody who makes good notes to make notes for the whole class. Now they can make AI notes, but this is problematic because in many faculties, they've banned the use of mobile phones and even laptops in the classroom because they perceive that this is dangerous for the students' education. So the idea of AI notes has not been not been very much used because it's felt to be a form of cheating. Okay. I know this is probably going to change, but that's what we have at the moment. So anyway, when we had that reality in front of us, what we decided to do was do a little experiment with the collaboration of one of the teachers in the Faculty of Economics. So he is the co-author with me and Hanne Rotoft of a paper which actually contains this experiment, and I can show you at the end of my little session today. So next slide. Yeah. We worked in an obligatory course. It had to be first year because we thought first year students are the ones who need this most. In the people studying a degree in economics and business administration in English. There were over 100 students in the class, but only 35 of them gave consent and completed all the parts of the study. We were very disappointed at that, but that was what happened, right? It was just enough, really. Next slide. Like all experimental studies, we needed to have a pre-test and a post-test. So the pre-test consisted of one of his real lectures, one of the real lectures. We managed to get him to provide a slot of 10 minutes, and then we took the students' notes after that 10 minutes. We gave them back afterwards to find out what kind of notes they were taking in natural circumstances. Then we designed a session that would last for the whole class. It was based on a real class that he was giving them, so they all had to attend that class. It wasn't something extra. But we incorporated into the class several activities, which I will explain in a minute, involving improving note-taking skills. So we gave them new ideas. We looked at what they did. They also worked together a bit to criticize each other's notes. And at the end, we looked at the things that they had done. And then another day during another lecture, we looked at the notes they took in the next lecture, in a post-test, and the students completed a questionnaire. Okay, so what exactly did we do? What was our intervention? If we look at the next slide, it gives us some ideas. So for example, we had an activity in which, well, activity A is not mentioned here, but activity A was people just taking notes in their normal way for 10 minutes. Activity B is in small groups, the groups of 2 or 3 or 4. The students were supposed to compare their notes and then come back and give us feedback on the notes that they'd made. Then we gave them a few tips. So for example, how can you make abbreviations that are going to make sense? How would you abbreviate the word individual or business or company? And then what do these common abbreviations stand for? We're not saying you have to use the same abbreviation as everyone else, but these will be typical abbreviations that people might use. And then some other tips for note taking. So for example, why do some people try to write down everything? I think it's a form of insecurity. The main point about note taking is you have to be selective. So then we looked at some examples of information and how you could compress that into a smaller package of, if you like, words. We also looked at graphic organization. So using flow diagrams, using for example, how to express a process, how to express a structure or a hierarchy. And we looked at the advantage of using different forms of graphic representation, all applied to the lecture he was giving that day. So the important thing was that students didn't lose their lecture, but we used that lecture to teach them ideas about note-taking. Okay, that was our experiment. And then later on, we did our post-test. So if we move to the results, thank you. We did a test to find out how the post-test differed from the pre-test. We did paired t-tests because we had the same student in both. In the post-test, we found the students used significantly more symbols. so little diagrams and things, and more abbreviations. There was much more abbreviation in the post-test. So we thought that was one thing they'd learned. They learned that if you make an effective abbreviation, it is actually useful. We also had more results on the next slide, I think. Which was that the number of symbols used rose a little bit. Maybe it wasn't statistically significant, but it rose. And the percentage of abbreviations per the total number of words also went up. And we found in the post-test they used a much higher ratio of content words, not so many function words. So they're using the keywords in a meaningful way and not putting in things like the and and have and auxiliary verbs and things like that. So it's nice to look at a few examples of what they really did. And on the next couple of slides, we have an example of one of the students' notes. So we can see, we can see it has a life cycle of the company or product development. We can see how this student very nicely put together a sort of diagram in which he or she actually used some of the ideas that we'd mentioned, and also avoids using, for example, language words. I mean, running words. It's mainly content words. The next one is also quite interesting. This is the industry life cycle again. What's interesting is that they all did it differently, which shows that this visualization of information is actually quite individual, you know. In my opinion, it would probably also have helped if the teacher had made the classes more visual. But the teacher was very much in the line of, I tell them how it is, and they write it down. So they had to do their own visualizations. That's also quite typical in this culture, right? And the next one is also quite nice. The next one has, we see the next one? Yeah. Again, sorry, no, that's it, number 15. The industry life cycle. And again, that person has done a completely different visualization. What's nice about this is that you can see how the student is using some of the strategies we mentioned, like underlining, circling, writing in capital letters, in order to show the importance of different parts of the information. These are all things that we pointed out in the study. So in the next slide, we also talk about the questionnaires, because we felt it was important to get the students' impressions of whether they thought what they'd done had actually been useful or not. Our students tend to be very confident that they're good at making notes, and they tend to be very bad at doing it. So you have to get through that sort of natural defensive mechanism that say, no, I know how to do that. I know how to speak English. I know how to write in English. Maybe they feel that if they said they had a problem, you would somehow use that information against them. I don't know what it is, but they tend to be rather overconfident. And so I think it was interesting that they appreciated the session. I think this session has taught me how to take notes more effectively using less words, right? That sums up, if for that person, this idea of being more efficient. The mind maps abbreviations and mainly making a legend from my own abbreviations were very useful. So this person thought it was useful not just to use abbreviations, but to make a key, you know. So I know co means company, ind means industry, and then you use it with more confidence. It made me more conscious about how I take notes and made me realize you can't spell, but that's not a problem. There are better ways to take notes, right? So, I mean, okay, spelling is not part of it, is it? All right, so on the next slide, I have some conclusions, I think. That's right, conclusions of the study, which our main conclusion was that these EMI students appear to benefit from support at developing note-taking skills. They appreciated the fact that it was given within the framework of their usual classes. I don't know about your context. In my context, the teachers consider that help with academic skills is not necessary. Yeah. And then they complain that the students' performance is very poor. So they're caught in a kind of problem. I think the thing is, if they say that they need help, it's almost admitting that they are weak, you know? And then they tend to blame the students. Yeah, it's all the students' fault because the students are not good enough. So you have to find somebody. We were very fortunate in finding a German colleague who was teaching an aspect of business in English, and he thought it would be constructive to do this type of thing, and he helped us with this study. But not all teachers are willing to let other people into their classroom. This is one of the problems that we have in Spain. We have much here. It's called the cátedra. You have this individual right to teach what you want in your subject, and no one should look at you. No one should criticize you. No one should tell you whether it's good or bad. That's your personal right. And of course, it's actually rather negative because it means there's very little coordination in reality, and there's very little feedback about what goes on in large lecture rooms. And so we've managed to sell this idea to other people in the university, providing they are willing, if you like, to allow people into their classroom. And you make the point that you're not going to invade their space. What you're going to do is take their normal lecture and just use that lecture as a way of helping their students to do something a bit better. But we do need more research to identify the optimum length and content of the interventions. So maybe it will be better to go in for 10 minutes each day and teach a different strategy for note taking each day. I would like to do that. So one day you could teach something about abbreviations, another day you could teach about graphic design and so on. It might also be interesting to deliver some online sessions about note taking. And also, we need to know more about the long-term effects. The main criticism of most research in English for academic purposes and ESP and pedagogy in general is that we don't measure the effects after a few weeks have passed or after a few months have passed. And so we have to get around that problem somehow. We need a delayed post-test to see whether in the long term it's had any effect. And at the end, we have further support. Thank you. So some of the things that we've been suggesting in the work we did with this German lecturer and my colleague from the public university, we developed, in fact, some support for students, helping them to write the kind of exam answers that they write in Spain. So I come from the United Kingdom, and our exam tradition is very much writing essays. So you write an essay, which is maybe 3 or 4 pages long to answer each question. In Spain, there's a tradition of short answers, but students are not very good at answering these short answers because they don't understand what's expected of them. So we did a few sessions where we trained the students to analyze the question by identifying the key words in the question and then shaping the answer to fit what the question really says. So if the question says, for example, classify the different kinds of company and explain why somebody might decide to form one kind of company rather than another, you have to look at that question, and it has the word classify. So you have to produce a classification. You have to produce a scheme showing what different kinds of company exist, and then explain why will be about how people make decisions. And so the students really tend to only answer part of the question. We train them to answer all the key words in the question. Asking and answering questions in class, that was a funny one. That some teachers told us the students don't know how to ask questions. And so we prepared some exercises where we taught students how to ask questions and then some strategies for how to answer questions. Presenting in public, clearly, most universities provide courses in presenting in public for their students. And so we have everything from a 1 hour session to a 6-hour course in how to present in public. And this is always quite good, but it tends to be voluntary. We can't impose it on the students. And then the other one is cultural expectations. And I think This one is particularly useful for the EMI teachers because our EMI teachers tend to get a lot of exchange students, and they find that their behavior is very different from the behavior of the local students, but they don't know why. And then sometimes they feel very threatened by it, and they say, I'm not going to allow any Erasmus students into my class ever again because they cause trouble, they ask questions. Well, in their culture, it's normal to ask questions, right? So we actually developed some material about how cultural expectations may be different in different countries and different cultures due to the educational culture of that country. So in North America, for example, it's very much expected that students should ask questions because that's how the teacher knows that they're listening. And it's an individualistic culture. And so people are not frightened to ask a question that might even be considered radical or someone might disagree with because that's his expression of his rights and his personality. Whereas in collective cultures, more collective cultures like Spain, nobody wants to ask a question that seems to be potentially risky or out of line with what the main idea seems to be, right? No one would ever disagree with the teacher. Even if they really don't agree with the teacher, they will not say this in public. And so these cultural expectations are quite important once you get a very globalized situation. So I hope that's been interesting for you. On the next page, I have some references on note-taking. So for some of you, it may be interesting to pursue this topic of note-taking. You can see the articles by Josef Siegel there, and also our article is by me, Hannah Rothoft, and Marcel Meyer, and it's published in Language Learning in Higher Education. And I think this is an area that needs more research, and I think probably in Tunisia or in other countries, it will be interesting to look at what's happening because you may have very different traditions in this area. On the next page, I've also got some references on EMI, and these are more the people in my own group. We've done research on English medium instruction, teaching in English in the university, using the L1 in university lectures. With Emma Dafoe, who's a very well-known researcher in Madrid. We worked on exam answers in EMI courses and a few other things. If you want any of those papers, please feel free to contact me because I'm very happy to send them to you. We can just go on to the last couple of slides, taking notes. Any questions? And thank you. But these are my email, and I would like to thank Marcel Meyer and Hannah Rothoft for helping me with this study because we very much worked together to do this. It wasn't just me, it was the three of us. So feel free to contact me. I would be very happy to hear from you. And also, if you would like to visit Spain and visit my university, we often have visiting PhD students, visiting postdocs, and visiting teachers, indeed, sometimes. So any questions?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Ruth. That was a really, really very interesting. I'm going to let the floor to the participants. I do have many questions on my from my side, but I would like to so I would like to let the participants ask their own questions. So you can type in your questions in the conversation bubble, or you can just raise your hand. I will activate your mic. So we have one first question by Amina. So Amina, I'm gonna activate your mic so that we can hear you. Amina? Yeah.
Morning, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Hello? Yes,
Yes,
we do hear you.
Much, Professor, for your interesting presentation. It's really thrilling to see someone talking about note taking, which is a very important academic skill for students to master. Actually, I have one question here. You have mentioned note taking and the effect of note taking on academic performance. In the reference list that you have provided, is there any of the references that deal with note-taking leads to better academic performance? And thank you.
Well, thank you for that. To my knowledge, nobody has actually worked out the correlation between note-taking and academic performance.
Okay.
What they tend to do is correlate note-taking skills either with self-evaluation, yeah, so good note-taking and how the student feels about how he or she has understood the lecture and the contents or whatever, or they're experimental studies like the ones I mentioned, where they measure different aspects of note-taking. But I would advise you to look at the papers by Josef Siegel, because this has been his PhD topic, and he's gone into it in more detail than anybody else I know. And so you could probably start by looking at that, because he does mention at some point the problem that there is. We have a problem to do with data protection. So many years ago, when Paul and I did our study about listening skills, we were able to access the students' grades and measure the correlation between their listening level and their grade. But now we would have a big difficulty trying to get hold of the grades, because this is all under the data protection. We have a thing in Spain called the rights of the student. And I, as another teacher from another course, would not be given the right to access the students' grades in a different course without asking for very special permission, and that permission might not be granted. You'd have to do the ethics application in the university, and then you'd have to find a way of ensuring absolute anonymity of all the results, which is in fact not difficult. The problem is the committee, because the committee wants you to prove that you're not going to in any way reveal any defects about any particular individual student, or anything indeed. So all of that has become much more difficult to do, and it would be a very important thing to do. And maybe if in your university you can do that, because the rules are different in different places, it would be a very valid thing to do. It would be really interesting to look at the notes of, if you like, the good students and the notes of the bad students, and see how they're different. Yeah. Or measure specific aspects about, whether making graphic notes leads to a better result, or making it notes with abbreviations leads to a better result. That would be really interesting.
Would, actually. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Really interesting.
Thank you, Amina. We do have another question by Mariam. Mariam, let me activate your mic so that you can ask your question.
Hello, Mariam.
We don't hear you, so Mariam? If there is any other question. So I think
I found a question here. Someone is asking me which program they can visit my university.
Yes.
This is of course important, because in each country we have different programs. So within Europe, you can apply for an Erasmus exchange. And so if you're a PhD student or a teacher or a researcher, you can get some money from the European Union to visit other countries. I've done it many times. And so you can go for anything from a couple of days to 2 months. They give you the same amount of money. So if you go for 2 months, you have to save a lot, right? But it's a very good way to get integrated into a department in another university. Oh, Marianne has a problem with her microphone. Okay.
Yeah.
From Tunisia, I don't know, for example, what programs there are. I know that from Algeria, there is a national program which gives money to university teachers who want to come and spend a research stay in Spain. We very often welcome teachers from Algeria. Yeah. But I don't know in each country what the rules are. We mainly receive people from Europe and from the United States, where they have other systems. And as I say, in my department, we've had a lot of visitors from Algeria.
It's from my side, yeah, go ahead.
In Tunisia, do you have a program where you can apply to visit other countries?
We do have some programs, Erasmus, for students But it really depends on the university.
Yeah.
I don't really know that much about these programs. I know that they are there. I know that there are some programs available for teachers, especially if there is a kind of like an internet memorandum of understanding or international cooperation agreement between the university and the other university. But I'm not really very sure about the specifics about for each university. So this is
Yes,
something that every single one should really ask at the level of the university.
exactly. You will have somewhere a research office or an exchange international office. The international office will somehow collect all the information about this type of exchange. One interesting thing to know within Europe is that if you apply for a teaching exchange, it's much more difficult. But if you apply for a training exchange, you don't need to have a pre-existing agreement with the other university. So it's much more flexible. You can agree to visit any university in Europe
Right.
on a training exchange. And they give you the same money. And if you want to do some teaching while you're there, you can. But it's not necessary to have a pre-existing agreement. The problem with the teaching exchange is that it's already supposed that there's an agreement in place. I didn't find that out until fairly recently, and I think it's been a liberation because it means that you can go anywhere you like, really.
Right.
It's really a wonderful scheme in Europe. I've been many times to different places. But
Mariam,
it depends.
can you try now?
Or Miriam,
Just
you could
make
write your question
yeah.
in the chat.
Yeah. Or try to also activate it from your side because from mine it's activated. Yeah, or just write your questions. So it doesn't work. Okay, so please write your question in the conversation box. So on my side, perhaps waiting for someone else. Amina, do you have another question, or is it the hand lifted from the other?
Actually, I forgot to put it
Yeah,
down.
go
Sorry
ahead.
about that.
Okay.
Trying
Right.
to. Yeah, sure.
Right. So perhaps I will pop up. Okay, just waiting for Mariam to write her question. For seagull studies, okay, that you mentioned on note taking, they can really be, it's research, but they can really be very relevant for teachers when they want to assess their students in a qualitative way. Like they take their notes from the class, EAP teachers, and they would use this as part of the assessment, okay, for their listening skills. So I just wanted to perhaps link the research to the practice. And just to answer one of your questions, Ruth, is that we are doing a kind of a reform called the rehabilitation of our degrees, of all our university degrees in Tunisia. And we are introducing obligatory modules. One of these is study skills for first year students, so that they will know how to manage their university studies. So it includes time management, note taking, and so on and so forth. So it's a module that should be there for all the students. It's not only English students, but for across all disciplines at the university, especially for first year students who are just jumping from school to the university, and they are kind of like lost, and they need some guidelines for them to know how to really navigate all the requirements at the university. And it used to be there for the English program. At least for some university, I taught that at some point for English students. Yeah, but it depends really on the institute or the faculty where you're teaching. In some faculties, it's still there. In other faculties, it's just disappeared for some reason.
This is the problem, I think, that there's a feeling out there that these things are like an extra, that the students don't really need them. And then the students themselves have a funny attitude too, because if it's not obligatory and the grade doesn't count, they're never going to value it the same way as they value a course that is obligatory with a grade that counts for your average. I think the answer is to make it obligatory, to be honest.
Yeah, so it's obligatory actually to
Yeah,
do it
that's very important. In
for
Spain,
first
it's
year
not,
students.
and for my students, this is a demotivating factor.
But for perhaps for non-English fields, I think that most English teachers teaching in EMI context, so in business, for example, or engineering, they tend to focus more on ESP rather than EAP. So they teach like English for specific purposes without really teaching academic English, right? Except for some universities who sometimes introduce EAP courses, especially pre-sessional in private universities, pre-sessional EAP courses.
Oh yeah, pre-sessionals are good.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if Mariam could write her question in the conversation box. Oh yeah, okay.
Oh wow,
So
that's a long question.
right. I would like to thank you a lot for your insightful presentation. I just wanted to share my own experience as an English language teacher. Note-taking is extremely important for university students since it's one of the major skills they have to acquire together with critical thinking, time management, and self-reliance. In my course of critical reading, I usually try to teach my students how to highlight, circle, or underline keywords and key ideas, and write down any important question that comes to their minds. Now, it's very good to share those experiences. Thank you, Mariam. Right.
Thank you very much. I think that's very important. Critical reading and critical thinking are one of the key university skills. And at the same time, they're not very well understood. You know, certainly here we have difficulties with this concept of critical thinking. And I think it's because people see the word critical and they think it means negative. And of course, that's not what it means. And this idea of, I love the way you put here, writing down important questions that come to their mind, because what critical thinking is about questioning things, isn't it? And that's very, very important. So thank you very much, Miriam, for that.
And I also found, okay, from Morocco, right. Right. Okay, so Mariam is from Morocco, right. I also find it interesting that she's talking about note-taking in relation to reading, because most of the time we talk about note-taking in relation to listening, and not in relation to reading, but that's also part of the reading skill, right?
That's
reading
right.
and taking notes. Right.
One thing we've done in the past is this idea of reading and taking notes. So you have a reading, but the useful way of doing that type of difficult long reading is to write in the margin, like the medieval scribes, write, a little summary of each part as you go along. For example, underline the key words. All of these are strategies that can be very useful for you when you're learning how to study. And indeed, learning how to do academic work. It's a very useful thing. So very important. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So any other questions? Okay. Right. Okay. So thank you very much, Ruth, for this amazing presentation and for sharing with us the findings of your work. I'm not sure if you want to add something about your presentation.
No, I mean, I'm very happy to share the presentation with you if you would like it. You have it already, Basma, so if you wish, you can turn it into a PDF and send it to people. I prefer it sent as a PDF, I think.
Yes, I will do that.
And I was going to say, please feel free to contact me about anything you're doing, especially if you're doing research in this area, because maybe I can put you in touch with some other people in Spain who are working on academic skills in EMI, because Spain has been a big center of research for EMI, and it's something that I think we've done well. I'm going to a local EMI conference in Córdoba in the spring, and every year we have the local EMI conference, and then we have a European EMI conference, which is very interesting because you start to see how if you like, how the way of talking about EMI has developed. So maybe 20 years ago, people were saying, it's not possible. Students are not going to understand anything. The level's going to go down. It's going to be a disaster. And now people are saying, well, students do manage. But there's a question about what they actually learn, whether they actually do improve their language. I would like you to look at my journal, which is Revista Iberica. I put that. I can actually find you the proper address. Just a second, and copy it into the chat for you, because in the current issue of Iberica, there's a nice article by Rona Lohan in Madrid about whether or not students' English skills improve after 2 years of EMI. And in fact, what she did was she compared the students who did 2 years of EMI and the students who just did normal English classes for 2 years and EAP classes for 2 years and did the rest of their degree course in Spanish. And she found that the students who did the English classes improved more than the students who had been exposed to EMI for 2 years, which makes you think that those of us who come from the world of language teaching actually knew what we were doing, right? We know what we're doing in language teaching, because if we teach a language, people learn it. And you do not pick it up in the same way through incidental learning just by sitting in lectures listening to things in that language. Some people may, but most people don't. And so take a look at this, please, and the article in it by Rona Lohan, which is you will find in the journal now. And also, I welcome you to submit any papers you have to Iberica. We have quite a high rejection rate, but we do give some feedback. And it's a journal basically of languages for specific purposes and specialized communication. EMI and EAP come into that, but it's not our main focus. So we do publish 2 or 3 articles in every edition about EMI and EAP related topics and academic writing, but we also publish on legal languages, medical communication, tourism communication, things that are specialized. So and it's open access, free, and you shouldn't have any problem accessing it. Please let me know if you do. Okay. And I look forward to further collaborations with you all.
Thank you, Ruth. I think we have another question by Amina. Amina, would you like to ask your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not a question. It's more like sharing a thought here.
Sure.
I'm here not only as a researcher, but also as an inspector student. I'm an inspector of secondary education.
Oh, wow.
Yes, thank
you. A powerful person.
I am indeed. And the ministry is actually encouraging us to come up with any bright 21st century ideas in which we can actually change the curriculum of the primary, secondary education and also basic education. And I think I'm going to propose to the ministry changing probably the way we teach geography, physics, history, biology, chemistry. Instead of dictation in secondary schools and also in primary and basic education, we probably could develop this skill that is note taking. So instead of the traditional way of the teacher dictating the course, so you've got a PowerPoint presentation, a video, and then probably note taking instead of dictation, where the student is not a recipient but a critical thinker. Also, as you have mentioned,
This is it, because when you take notes, you have to decide, you have to discriminate, you have to make your own picture of the subject, don't you?
Yes, indeed, exactly. And I think I think it's very important when it comes to those subjects where the students think that it's a matter of probably learn by heart and then remember. And ministry is actually having a problem with that. Based on Bloom's taxonomy, we are trying to find a way to probably move on to the top of the pyramid and encourage students to be creative and critical thinkers. So I think this technique, or I don't know how you call this,
so
it's important a technique going to actually help our students and also prepare them for university, as Professor Besma said here. I mean, they will not find themselves in a situation where they don't know anything about it like I did. I mean, moving on from secondary education into university, you are actually in the face of note-taking and you don't know anything about it. That was the thing that I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yes, and I think, for example, in the science subjects, the STEM kind of subjects, and geography and environment come more or less into this now. There have been big pedagogical advances, I think, in some countries. In Britain, they've certainly been very interested in teaching science in a more user-friendly way, a more
Exactly.
Yeah, and in Spain too, we've moved on a bit, and particularly it's been innovators from the area of CLIL and teaching science in English who tended to bring in the new ideas to Spain, and now they're starting to do those things in Spanish as well. So I think this international contact is very interesting to have, yeah. And here we have quite a lot of initiatives because we have a big science faculty and we have a science museum that does a lot of things for schools. And so I've been a little bit involved in this, and it's very exciting. Yeah. They have lovely projects. Maybe you can get in touch, and I can put you in touch with some people who are interested in working on that.
Can you mention the names again, please? Sorry.
Right. So, for example, we have this Museo de Cien. Yes. So my university has this science museum, which is it has a pedagogical department, and so they're preparing like pedagogical activities for different levels of schooling, and they've been everything from teaching about, I don't know, fossils to people in primary school, to teaching about the effects of drugs to teenagers, lots of different things that actually are related to science but also related to real life. Yeah.
Interesting.
If you send me an email and I will put you in touch with the person in charge of that.
Thank you so
and
much.
with their website, which I don't have at this moment.
Well,
I mentioned that we're in a state of site chaos here at this moment, and so I can see I can just see the technicians coming in to try and do something to the ceiling because all this water came in. So maybe I better leave you, I think.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very
well,
much,
thank you so much.
Ruth. I hope everything will be okay in your building after the floods. Yeah, thank you very much. And I just want to say to participants that her email is in the PowerPoint that I will send with your certificate of attendance. So you can contact her if you need any further information or any article that you would like to get access to and that you don't have access to. Right.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Ruth, for this very interesting presentation and for this discussion. I look forward, and we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks here in Tunisia.
Yeah. So exciting.
Right. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.